Linda, you got this?
When do you have
Okay, now I do.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, welcome. Chris, is it possible that you could put us on the last slide? Anyway, I'll keep going. Anyway, I'm Linda Rossner, chair of Hollywood Smpte, and I am thrilled to have everybody here. I thank you again. Oh, this has been a talking point. I apologize for the multiple email invitations. There has been an issue with some people receiving them and some people not. We're going to try to work that out. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for dealing with all of this. A little bit of housekeeping. Smpte headquarters, Smpte National, is going to be having a meeting on Thursday, June 3rd, expanding the color universe, the next frontier in imaging. You can scan and learn more to register on that little icon there, or whatever we call it. I apologize for not naming it correctly. And I also,
QR code.
Barcode, thank you.
No,
The barcode.
QR.
I knew it was something good. Thank you. Good. Go, guys. Also, I just want to say we had elections, Smpte elections, Hollywood elections, and I want to congratulate everybody. We have managers Iris Wu and Lon Neumann, and Belinda Merritt re-ran for manager and is manager again. I am honored to be chair once more, and also thrilled to have Rich Woolrich as secretary treasurer, who's done wonderful. And they join our other managers as well. So we thank you very much for that. I'm going to kill my phone. I'm going to mute myself and introduce Belinda, and thank you all.
Speaking of. Hey, everybody. So nice to see you here tonight. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate that you're here. And it looks like we have a lot of interest in the topic tonight. We are honored to have with us some really magnificent guests. From Sony Pictures Entertainment, we have Adam Amata. He's the Executive Director of Post-Production Solutions. His colleague is Stephen Shapiro, who's the Manager of Technology for Post-Production. And then from MTI Film, we have Larry Chernoff, and also giving us yet another point of view is Roger Singh, who is the Director of Global Business Development for Media and Entertainment, and he comes to us from Nutanix and has a very special workflow to talk to us about. So guys, I'd like to sort of send it around the room, maybe starting with you and Steve and Adam, to sort of say a few words about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Adam, from Sony Pictures. And essentially my team is responsible for managing, deploying, supporting all of our editorial, picture editorial systems, as well as the production sound on block. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me as well. My name's Steve Shapiro. I'm the Manager of Technology Post-Production for the Technology Development Group at Sony Pictures. So I work on upcoming technology, new post-production workflows, and before that, I was actually an assistant editor for about 15 years. So this is right up my alley. So thank you.
Nice. And Larry?
Hi, I'm Larry Chernoff. I'm the CEO of MTI Film. We are a post-production house located here in Hollywood. We support remote Avid editing as well as post-production, generally speaking, for both film restoration and episodic television.
Thank you. And Roger, would you round us off?
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Thanks for having us on this. My name is Roger Singh. I'm the Director for Global Media Entertainment Business Development here. So go-to-market solutions focused around media entertainment, post-production workflows, studios, broadcast, all of the above. I have a post-production and engineering background, so I come from the customer side, like many of you are today, and happy to be here, and thank you for the invite.
Awesome. So let's get this party started and jump right in. In March 2019, our world changed quite a bit. And I think that all of us would agree that where we are today is nowhere near where we were back in March and April and May of last year. So I'd like to start with, taking a look back. Where did you start with COVID lockdown? Adam, let's start with you because you certainly have a big story to tell and we'd like to hear about it.
Sure. Thanks, Belinda. Yeah, man, it was over a year ago. And at the time, it was like an exponential ramp, or at least it felt like that. Something that my department was tasked with relocating about 20 productions that were either at their facility or on the lot to then come up with workflows for them to be able to access their media from home and continue working as though nothing had happened. So it's something that I probably would have wanted 3 months to kind of prep and vet and test and then deploy. But we were given like a week, maybe a week and a half to get that all taken care of. So for lack of a better word, we were scrambling. And so what felt like, just finding out what the solutions were at the time. So it was just a combination, as I'm sure most of you know, that there's just hundreds of different potential solutions out there. And we were just trying to figure out, what we could utilize so that picture editorial could continue working from home. So we really found that there was kind of a lot of overlap between what certain things did, like, for example, No Machine, Splash Top, Jump Desktop, RGS. And we tried to really simplify it. So our first approach was kind of take it into 2 different categories, because at the time, this is all the technology we had for us, because this was all new to us. So the first one was, okay, well, what if we let everybody take their Avids home from the bay, bring it home, they work off of an external drive. And the pros for this was that the editorial crew, they knew their system, they knew the operating system, and it worked just like how it works in the edit bay. The cons of that solution was that media management became a much more manual process to handle. So assistant editors would need to be able to keep everybody on their team kind of updated. So we realized that it's not a one solution fits all because multicam shows have very different needs than features or big budget features. So that's when we started looking into essentially letting the system stay on the lot or at a facility, and then provide the hardware so that editorial can remote in. So the advantages to that is that the media is treated the same, their workflow is the same. The cons to that solution was that the feedback we were getting was anywhere between, it's okay to it's kind of laggy. So, at the time, those were really the 2 options that we had available to us. But the interesting thing that we kind of discovered was that it was frustrating at first because on paper, all this stuff works and all this stuff, you should be able to remote in. We're trying to figure out, okay, is it the home internet? Is it the computers that we're using? And trying to nail that down. And the interesting thing we kind of came across was that it was a kind of subjective almost, like each editorial crew had different needs. So it wasn't necessarily the workflow that was just okay or kind of laggy or it needed improvement. Some shows just, for the shows that needed the snappiness and some editors work really fast, that's when we kind of tailored the solution to work, bring the Avid at home. But what we were really looking for was a solution that kind of hit both, the snappiness of being able to work from home, like the system's there, but also that media management portion to kind of complete the picture for editorial to be able to work. And that's where Steve's team really came in, because at the time, my group was at best just treading water, making sure that everybody was, going and continue to make their air dates. So Steve's group really was able to kind of look into solutions that were out there and also infrastructure that we could take advantage of. But I'll let Steve talk about that because he's the real brains behind the operation.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I mean, from the technology development standpoint, everybody had been talking about moving to the cloud and doing things in the cloud and for years already. And it's unfortunate that something like COVID happened, and unfortunate that people had to start thinking about things in a different way so quickly. But what was incredibly fortunate was our ability to adapt to the new frontier of editing. And our group in technology development, obviously everybody had some kind of solution, but we started really thinking about, well, what does Avid have that we could really leverage? Because we know all of these editors want to be on Avid. And we started talking and having that discussion and finding out that they were on Azure, and and just having these discussions starting maybe a week after March 15th, really very early on, when we really needed to work hard to really put this together. And we had an internal POC going within 2 weeks or 3 weeks from March 15th. And then, we were able to leverage that POC into actual production use, which became incredibly powerful for us to actually do at the studio.
That's awesome. So Larry, you run a brick and mortar traditional post facility in town. Your job is not only to do creative editorial for the television shows that you work with, but it's a much bigger picture than that. You take them all the way through finishing. So when the pandemic first started, what were the thoughts that were going through your mind and your team's mind? How did you think that you would change the workflow to accommodate the isolation of the pandemic? And then where did you end up?
Oh, that's a loaded question there, Belinda. Well, first thought that went through my mind is, how long is this thing going to last? Because according to some people, we had to lock down for 15 days, and to others, we would have to lock down for much longer. So the real thought was, how long can we survive this thing and accommodate what we're going to all go through? Somewhere around July, when we realized that this is going to last a long time, not a couple of days, not a couple of weeks, but maybe even more longer than anybody expected, I basically had an epiphany and said, guess what? We have to do everything remote. And that included making sure that that our clients who were beginning to panic themselves had the ability to continue editing. So somewhere around August, we started the journey of creating our own private cloud for Avid editing. And so we started off with a couple of shows, and we built within 6 to 8 weeks somewhere around 60 remote systems. And we're now up to about 100 of them active. So we have about 100 editors and assistants working on a variety of different shows, some of which that we do and some of which we don't do. And they just come to us now for the service of the offline. It's been a very, well, let's say, enlightening experience, because it's changed the psychology of how our clients react, work, not just, but also trying to make the commitment that we made and trying to justify it economically, because our commitment was whole hog. I mean, it was all hands on deck. We built it, as I said to you, in about 6 weeks. I'll just show you a quick picture if I can. Is that all right?
Please do. Yeah.
I'll just show you. So let's share this with you. So this is the beginning of it. It actually extends well beyond that now. But we're using typical hardware, hardware that you can pick up anywhere. It's Dell's, and it's all Windows based. We're using Nexus E4s, if you're familiar with that.
Mhm.
And we also needed to give our clients some assurance that they were going to be able to do their work, and if all hell broke loose, that they were going to be able to continue doing their work. So what we did was we created a system that had redundancy, and the redundancy came in a couple of different ways. Number one, we wanted fiber redundancy. So we ended up having two feeds, one from Santa Monica and one from downtown at 1 Wilshire. If one fails, it automatically switches over. We needed to give them redundancy on storage. So the E4s have dual controllers, and it has hot swappable drives. We also wanted to give them redundancy in terms of the media itself. So we automated daily backups. And that gave them some comfort, but it didn't give them enough comfort. In some cases, they wanted to have what we call the hybrid, which simply means that we started building systems at their production office so that in the event that something went haywire at our place, which knock wood never happened until at least not yet, but we anticipated that at some point it might happen, and certain clients were a little afraid that they wouldn't have the redundancy. So what we did was we put a couple of systems in there, and at any time, any of the editors can leave their home, drive to the production office, sit down at a workstation and start working just as though they were at home. And they can also work off a local nexus as opposed to the remote nexus if needed. Now, that's not been necessary for the most part, but it does give comfort to some clients who are willing to pay for that. So that's how we handled the offline that our clients required. And it's been a very good learning experience the last year. Our systems have improved. I'm happy to tell you that every editor that we've worked with has given us high compliments, but more importantly, they have delivered on time. And through the technologies that I'm sure most people are familiar with, for example, Evercast. Evercast has been a significant partner in the idea that you can share the media or share the video across a group of people who are interested parties. So there was that technology, and it started off a little rough, but it's gotten better and better as we all have learned to do better and better work for remote. In terms of the facility itself, of course, that's a whole other bag. And we had to come up with our own some new ideas as to how to have sessions with review sessions with the clients who were staying at home for the most part, didn't want to come into the facility. Occasionally they did, but for the most part they didn't want to or weren't allowed to. That was the other thing. There were certain studios that simply said you can't go into the facility. And so Teradek, we worked with Teradek on something called Prism. I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with it now, but we worked with them at the beginning in order to get the iPad to be perfectly in sync with our mastering monitors. And for the most part, we were able to accomplish that. So what we would do is we would either provide an iPad or they would bring their iPad to us. We would then have our colorists use the what they call Prism Core. Core is the application. It has nice little color wheels that you can manipulate and save color to. And by the time they go home and talk to our colorist, they're experiencing the color pretty much exactly as our colorist experienced it. And then in terms of editorial, we did the same things that I guess, again, most people have done, is we allowed people to use No Machine, or in our case, Parsec, to connect to our computers remotely. And so a lot of edit sessions, virtually every edit session was done remotely by our editors. And we fed it through Teradek again to using their system to pipe it to their homes. And then they could use VLC or they could use anything to go ahead and look at it. So it's been an interesting year for all of us. And I think the psychology of how we work has changed significantly, and the comfort level of working this way has improved significantly, or I should say increased significantly. So we're now at a point where choices are going to have to be made as to what our workflows are in the future. And it's my best guess at this point, having spoken to a lot of the editors and the assistants, they love the idea of working from home and only occasionally having to go in and work with their showrunner at the studio or at the production office.
Right.
And I suspect that that's going to be the model from here on out. Is there's a great deal of lifestyle improvement for the editors and the assistants. One of the things we did was we put Cortex on every machine. That's our software that we sell to the world. And they were able to, the assistants who normally, having been an assistant myself at one time in my life, like you, Stephen, 6 o'clock rolls around, the editors hand off to the assistants, and then the assistants have to do work from 6 o'clock until the work is done. And one of the things that Cortex afforded them was the ability to do multiple transcodes at the same time. And that saved them literally hours of time. So we have a very appreciative assistant editor user group.
Well, we know that saving time in the workflow has always been paramount to just about everything I've ever seen you do, Larry. So nods to you on that. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. You're wanting to move on from me. I can feel it.
Yeah, right? Love you bunches. But I think we've talked about two sort of different kinds of workflows, one for feature films and one for post-production facility finishing and creative. And what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about some technology that came into my purview about 1.5 years ago, literally right after COVID started, that I thought was pretty significant. And it's less of a workflow as it is more a tool that helps manage your workflow. And so, Roger, I'd like to toss to you, because I know that when the pandemic started, I'm just going to say this was not available in its current iteration as a certified tool to use within media and entertainment. But shortly after, it did become that, and it is being embraced by many people throughout our industry. So will you please explain to everybody what the heck is hyperconverged infrastructure and how does it help a media and entertainment workflow?
Sure, thanks, Belinda. So I think HCI and the Nutanix and just HCI, the concept was very new to people. Before the pandemic, and it grew to be this big conversation during the pandemic. And one of the reasons it was a secret or very, not well known, especially in our media technology space, there wasn't a lot of, integration or support for it or partnerships. So, you didn't have your top ISVs, your top application vendors out there talking to you about it, HCI, or what it could do, because there just wasn't those partnerships. So now that there's a lot more partnerships in the HCI space, with Avid, Adobe, Autodesk, NVIDIA, what have you, a lot of ecosystems, transcoding, encoding, whatever it might be, the conversation is picking up. But HCI, I'm going to share my screen because it's, pictures worth 1,000 words, right? So
Exactly.
I'm going to kind of share my screen here and talk through this. So this is just a single slide to give you an overview at a very high level what HCI does and the concept of HCI. So on the left-hand side of the slide here, you're going to see a traditional virtualization environment that we've, most of us been using, whether in media tech or the IT side, over the last, 15 years or so or longer. You've got block storage, you've got some kind of SAN network, you have your servers, your compute layer, and then, you have your virtualization layer, ESXi, VMware sitting on top of that, and then your applications that drive your workflows. And that's been, when it was built, it was great. It served a purpose. It did its job, but we've modernized, we've changed with the cloud era coming. into fold in the last couple of years, and a lot of people getting more into automation and just simplicity. I think, the cloud gave us a lot of simplicity. While some of us may use it or not, why people go to the cloud is not because it's cheaper, it's faster and it's simple in most cases. There isn't a lot of infrastructure to deal with. So Nutanix and the other, the HCI world essentially said, well, we can build a distributed cluster or distributive approach that, the same concept that runs Google's data center, Facebook's data center, and all of these hyperscalers in the world. We can build that and remove all these layers of management, remove the complexity out of infrastructure. So what basically HCI is integration of, you take x86 hardware, so your Dell hardware, your HP hardware, your IBM, your Supermicro, Cisco, whatever x86 hardware, you integrate, you take that compute hardware, you integrate storage, whether it be NVMe, whether it be SSD, spinning disk, you add robust networking to it, 10 gig, 25, 40, 100 gig. You make sure that the underlying software is secure from that perspective, and you built in the virtualization. So you give customers the choice to choose whatever virtualization they want. If you go into the public cloud today, not really concerned about, is it VMware, is it KVM, as long as it works. So giving customers that choice, whether it's a KVM hypervisor, it's Kubernetes, it's CSXi, and then layering your applications on top of that. So you take this Lego building block approach that's completely scalable. It's, zero failure, points of failures, highly redundant. The more you scale, the more redundant, the more performant it is. And you give customers a single interface to consume this, to troubleshoot, consume, deploy. So time to deployment, management, and scalability, predictable scalability. It simplifies anyone that's managing infrastructure or building out workflows and involved in that technology aspect of it. It really simplifies the management and ease of use. So this is what HCI has done for traditional IT, and it's doing for media technology, and over the last couple of years. So we see a lot of adoption in the media space with HCI because the story really lends itself to what we're trying to do in media technology. We try to focus on the workflows and all of the components to drive the business forward, and less time on infrastructure. So having a simplified approach where you can manage everything almost like the easy button. One of our customers actually coined that phrase with us is, you're the closest thing to an easy button as I'm going to get. And building that best of breed ecosystem with the big application partners is why HCI has seen such success during the pandemic, and even building more towards post-pandemic. So some of the things that we learned, prior to the pandemic, customers were talking about HCI as a consolidation of physical workstation into a virtual environment. And nothing around remote production. It's all still within the facility, but we're looking to consolidate physical workstations into VMs because it's more manageable. We don't have to keep multiple images for multiple, workstations, things like that. Pandemic hits, now it's a whole different game. It's not only just, consolidating those physical, it's now supporting remote editors and in the entire workflow. So, there were some lessons learned during that part on integration, best practices, versioning. These are all things that, customers heavily leaned on us and in the space, and we have to go out and provide all that. So I think we're in a, much more robust turnkey approach than we were in the beginning of the pandemic.
So Roger, thank you for that explanation. And just to sort of encapsulate it, I think what you're saying is that traditional media and entertainment machine rooms, if you will, their environment looks more like the application or the graphic that you have over to the left. But basically what I think you're saying is that with Nutanix, you take all of your compute and your storage and your networking, and you move over to the right. And that's what it looks like with a single user interface to manage all of that. So that way you don't have to have so many people managing the infrastructure. It's just very basic. Okay.
Correct. You don't have to have a virtualization expert. You don't have to have a storage expert. You don't have to have a SAN expert. Literally, it's one interface that does everything behind the scenes for you, and it's connected to top of the rack IP switches.
Gotcha. So that's a great explanation of what you're doing within the machine room data center space. Can you elaborate a little bit on how this helps the media and entertainment workflow? Let's say I've got an Avid, or I've got a Baselight, or a Resolve, or a Flame that I need to work with. How does this work in that workflow?
Yes, I think one of the value adds with this kind of architecture is that it's predictable. So you know exactly how to scale for whether it's editorial, if it's motion graphics, if it's VFX, whatever your use case is, it's highly predictable in the scale perspective. From an integration perspective, we've done work with a lot of the major vendors. So if you wanted that cloud-like experience, which we are on-prem, that self-service, the automation that's built into it, you know, you can go and automate the process of spinning up desktops, of deploying applications. All of the goodness of the public cloud that, you know, we've come to love is really offered on the platform and all integrated. So I said those are with the simplicity of the management is really the key points and why customers are really looking at HCI.
Gotcha. Very cool. Now, Larry, I know that in your data center, you talked a lot about how happy your editors and your post colorists and conform editors were with the workflow. How did you manage the latency issue?
Well, we use a thing called an application called Parsec, which is essentially developed by for gaming. And so the gaming industry has really, in a sense, helped us all because of all the latency issues that occur. So we haven't, using that, we were able to keep things in sync, keep the picture and the experience transparent. So that was where our R&D came in. We tried a variety of different applications, including No Machine, and I'm not going to list them all, but they're well known to everybody. And the one that really kind of stood out for us was Parsec. It gave us the ability to really have a transparent experience for the editor and for the assistant, for that matter. They don't know whether they're sitting in the production office or sitting at home if you're just looking at the screen. So it was really Parsec that did that.
Yeah, that's a big, sorry, Belinda, but that's a big piece of the Avid in the cloud, you know, using the Teradici Zero client and the broker agent was really important for us. You know, there's lots of ways to view stuff in the cloud, and you know, I have a couple of slides if you want. I can share just to sort of show some of the structure that we used.
That would be awesome, Steve. Thank you.
Sure. Hold on one sec. So essentially, what we're talking about is, you know, Avid being the editor and Microsoft Azure being the platform where all the VMs and the shared storage sits. We use just the online nexus and a nearline nexus in the cloud for a variety of reasons. They had some 4K material that they didn't want to access as often as their DNX 115 material. So we put that in a nearline so they could reduce their cost, as well as keep their DNX 115 stuff in an online environment so they could have their speed for their editing. Teradici, as I mentioned, has a PC over IP protocol, and they also were our broker agent for identity management and the KVMs. So everybody would log in using Sony's own Active Directory. So we were sure about the security behind it, and that was really important for us. As Larry mentioned, Evercast has kind of become the de facto sharer for collaboration. So we use them, and then obviously Aspera for our ingress and egress. In the cloud platform, we set up this 20 terabyte online storage for their DNX 115, which was probably a little bit of overkill, but you know, definitely was plenty of storage for what they needed. And then we used 12 core vCPUs for the Media Composer VMs. And one of the really cool things about, being in the cloud is when they had to go to their 4K material, and if they didn't have the speed and the power, you just click a button and say resize this VM to something with 32 cores, and now you're ready to go with the 4K material, which is really neat. And you're not paying for having that computer just sitting there waiting for somebody to use it. Instead, you can use it on the fly when you're ready. And then we took advantage of a 300 megabit upload bandwidth for the Aspera. And that was also really cool because we were able to dedicate one low quality VM, so something that doesn't have to do any editing, and just literally use our Fastpex connection to the Dailies house and have them upload directly to the Nexus that was sitting in the cloud, which again, super powerful just to be able to do that sort of thing, not have to send drives. And we had a bunch of Avid Media composers. We used the FlexNet server and the Teradici for the Cloud Access Manager. And the end user experience, probably very much like what Larry was doing, except we used a Zero client from Amulet Hotkey, which contains the PC over IP protocol. And we had some editors using as many as 4 monitors. The Zero clients can have as many as 4 monitors there. Each monitor requiring between 20 and 30 megabits per second for download. And then for upload, we found it only needed about 5 to 10 megabits per second because it's basically keyboard strokes and mouse clicks. Right. And all of that was connected through somebody's home internet to the Azure cloud. And then, when it came to things like collaboration, we would just add in that third part, which is the Evercast virtual room, which ironically is on a different cloud, but nonetheless, still, when you're in the cloud, you've got this huge bandwidth always available. So there's no issues sharing it, over the internet to the Evercast room, and then the users in their various homes, whether it's the other editor, director, producer, VFX editor, whatever, can all access that media at the same time and review it in real time, which was really great for our users.
Got it. That's awesome. So Adam, Larry alluded to the fact that his end users, his editors and other end users, they were not experiencing latency and they had a good experience. What kind of feedback did you get for your workflow?
Yeah, what Steve introduced is, we had some editors that commented that it was one of the snappiest most powerful computers that they've worked on because it's a virtual machine. And so to add on to that, it was a learning curve for everybody. It was a learning curve for the studio, for the client, for us, even though we kind of understood the technology. But the last production we deployed it on, the post producer came to us and said, okay, we're going to film in London, the editor's in New York, and the assistant editor is in LA. And prior to that, the fact that we were able to accomplish that, it didn't end up being like that. They both ended up being on the East Coast. But because I've been doing this for X number of years now, my brain is almost so solidified of like, oh, you can't do that. Wait, you can. So there was a learning curve of what was possible. And things before that I would have thought would have been cost prohibitive ended up changing our business model a little bit too, because you're essentially at this point leasing the computer, the storage, the licenses. So our business model kind of changed on that front as well.
Right.
So to be able to, because we support so many productions, I can't make one knife and tell a butcher this is the only knife you're going to have. Good luck.
Right.
Because ultimately, I recognize that these are editors that are going to be in their edit bay at 2 a.m. And if something's not working, I want them to be business owners in this with us too, because they need a tool that works for them. And so really, I just thought there's really 3 main areas. Does it work? Is it secure? And does it not cost an arm and a leg? And if it does that, then we can look to kind of deploy it.
Awesome.
So yeah, sorry, that was a long way of saying it wasn't that laggy.
That's awesome. And so Roger, I want to come back to you for just a second because you did a great job of explaining what the technology is, but I also happen to know that you've got a lot of studios globally that are using the Nutanix workflows with their, I think it's the if I remember correctly, the only Avid certified solution. Do I have that right?
Yes, from an HCI perspective, we are the only validated solution.
Got it. So could you tell us, since we don't have those studios here to tell us what it's like to work on the Nutanix infrastructure for HCI utilizing Avid and Premiere and Resolve and Flame and all of those, can you tell us a little bit about how that is working out for them?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I think just like Stephen and Adam talked about, their experience with the public cloud, with Azure. It's a little bit of the same with Nutanix, because that's what we do. We bring that cloud-like experience on-prem. So with the customers, they can start at a specific building block, and if they need to adapt, they can build off of that and leverage, resources as they need to. Like, they don't have to go out and buy this massive investment to support, whatever they're supporting, whether it's VFX, editorial, whatever they might be doing. And they can build from there at a small scale. They can start at a large scale. And I think that's what customers really appreciate. But the simplicity of, saying, hey, I have a template, just like you would in the public cloud. I have a template for this editor, I have a template for this motion graphics, this VFX, whatever designer you may have, and whatever workflows you're deploying, if you're deploying Aspera, if you're deploying Signet, if you're deploying transcoding, whatever vendor that might be, having those blueprints at the, click of a button were really, big selling points for customers. And I think they got a lot of use out of it. And it was a big shift from their legacy architecture and the way they used to do things, where they used to buy, these big bulky purchases in compute and storage, and that kind of just that whole concept. So the operating model, just like, Adam was talking about from the cloud and Stephen's perspective, their operating model changed as well. It was just on-prem private cloud versus public cloud.
Very cool.
Does Nutanix support both on-prem simultaneously, right? You can have on-prem and also backed up to the cloud?
Yes, so we did an integration with AWS last year. That's released. So you can, from a single interface, you can actually, if you have a Nutanix deployment on-prem in a colo, whatever the case is, from our single interface called Prism, you can go and connect your public cloud account that you already have with AWS, and go and deploy Nutanix on bare metal, EC2 bare metal in AWS, and start deploying VMs or moving VMs from on-prem. So you can build that public cloud as a scale-out approach, or you could start new workloads out there. We'll be releasing that integration with Azure at the end of the summer.
Cool. That's
Nice.
Both like the most infuriating and inspiring thing in terms of once you feel like you know something, and then all of a sudden there's a whole other level.
So, the thing with we talked a lot of customers, and everyone, the consensus is, I think it was something like 80% of customers we spoke to and surveyed, hybrid is going to be the operating model of the future, at least for the next 5+ years. And so trying to give customers the easiest hybrid operating model is what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve from that single interface. So without, keeping that simplicity that we do on-prem with public cloud is what we're trying to do and what we're going forward with.
Yeah, we've thought a lot about the hybrid aspect of it, especially once the pandemic is over. How will people return? Will they be there every day? Will they be there twice a week, at the office? So one of the nice things about the cloud, editing situation is these Amulet hotkey boxes can be anywhere, and they're not full computers, and you could carry it from one place to another if you needed to, or you could have one in the office and one at your home and just some monitors and keyboard and mouse, and you're ready to go. So we found that, if that becomes a model that we need to really think about, that hybrid model of just somebody going in and out of the office, we don't need to go, on-prem and cloud. We can keep it all cloud and just keep the KVM basically on-prem and at their home.
Awesome. So these are some very diverse workflows that we've talked about today. Greg Chaccio actually posted a question, and he wanted to know, and I think this is based on how many monitors you have running in your deployment. What kind of last mile bandwidth would you recommend for acceptable use by artists?
So we recommend that they have 50 megabits at home. However, it doesn't require, that's with a lot of overhead. So 25 megabits is perfectly fine. And it can support a full screen playback. That's where the megabits get eaten, is in full screen playback. And then the other monitors are pretty minimal. But I would say 25 megabits is sufficient, but we always ask for 50.
Good deal. I don't think Spectrum gives me that much. Adam, what about you? You talked about
Linda, I just want to interrupt here because Joe Davenport, who's been chatting, he's been great. He said he just checked the spec for Bebop and it requires 20 bits per second due to compression. But as Larry just said, 50 megabits would be better.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Joe, for checking that out. Adam, you said that you had as many as 4 monitors in your deployments. What is your suggestion there?
I mean, it's tough to say because it's people's home network. So, well, please no Wi-Fi. Just connect. Use a cable, please. And then second is, people would run speed tests for us and share the results. But there's so many variables. I mean, if your kids are going to school, they're going to eat up some of that bandwidth too. And so, we always just ask, the more you can get, the better. But Steve could actually address the monitor bandwidth.
Yeah, from the Teradici standpoint, we would say between 25 and 30 megabits per monitor, but that is giving yourself a little bit of extra because like Larry said, not all the monitors are doing full screen playback. You basically we had one editor that had 4 monitors hooked up to their Zero client. The left and right monitor were simply the Avid software. The third monitor was a client monitor on their desk doing a full screen playback. And then every now and again, they'd put it up on a TV too. So they might have up to 2 monitors at full screen playback, but the other 2 are just, quarter screen playback. And then on the bins monitor, pretty much no playback necessary. Very few pixels are changing per second. So I think for him, he had as much as 150 megabits in his home, which was more than enough to get him through it. And when we would run our speed tests and check, what we were really getting on a monitor, some of those monitors would be as little as 10 megabits per second because there's just not many moving pixels. Right. And that's part of the Teradici system in terms of how it works and what it refreshes and what it doesn't refresh. But for the full screen playback, definitely 25, 30, but yeah, more is better.
Awesome. Well, before we move on to our next question, which is a really good one, I wanted to ask Roger. Roger, we would like to know, when you're working within HCI, how many monitors can your setup support, and what would be your measurement for that?
Yeah, so that just depends on the workflow. So we could, when you talk about monitor support, that's tied to how robust your GPU is, right? So are you using RTX 6000, 8000, and using T4s? What GPU profile you're going to use? So most people, the minimum GPU profile in any of those cards you're going to use when you're using NVIDIA Grid is going to be a 4Q profile. You could jump to 8Q, which will give you more monitor heads, but 4Q 1080, you can do 2, 3 very easily. Jump to 8Q, you got 4+ monitors, 1080, and you've got dual monitors at 4K. So that really just depends on your GPU resources. The CPU impact is minimal, but that's more about GPU. So that's really what drives that.
Right. Thank you. So we have a question from Jeffrey Stansfield, and this is one that I'm sure is probably on everybody's mind. We've all talked about it a lot, and that is security. We all understand that we have to be MPAA compliant, and most of our post houses and studios are looking for TPN certification. So what are you guys doing special if you have somebody that is working remotely to keep them from taking some of that material and pushing it out in the dark web or doing something nefarious with it?
Well, if you'd like, I'm going to let Guthrie, who's our senior engineer, explain what we've done on security, if it's okay with you, Belinda.
That would be awesome. Guthrie, come on in.
I could do it, but it would make no sense whatsoever. So, hold on one second. Here comes Guthrie.
Hello.
Hey, Guthrie.
One of the biggest thing for security was just making sure that the system that they were connecting, that was connected to the storage, didn't have open internet access, so they couldn't.
Michael, Guthrie, I need you to speak up.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, be a little louder.
Okay.
Don't worry. Thanks. Sorry, guys.
So the biggest thing was just setting up the machine so that they were accessible to all of the remote software, but not accessible to the open internet. And then just having them be air gapped the same way they would be if they were in the facility. And then but also allowing the assistant editors who needed to upload to various things like PICs and DACs, the ability to do so. And for that, we used Media Shuttle. We had a Media Shuttle transfer station basically that could download from Media Shuttle that was not connected to the Nexus, and then upload to wherever they needed to upload that media to. And most of the assistant editors were used to, I guess when they were on premise, being able to upload directly from their system. But when they came to us, we did enforce all of the security standards, just because with everybody working from home, and even though we did do everything on the remote system they were working on to make sure that they couldn't add any viruses or search for anything that go to any websites they shouldn't be going to, having anything at home is always going to be more risky than having it on premise.
Got it.
The biggest thing was just creating that same air gap that you would have when you're on premise.
Thank you. And Stephen, how about you guys?
Well, from the perspective of the at home, we didn't give them computers. So we basically gave them these zero clients. So they basically didn't have any way to upload, download, access. You can, the zero client has USB ports, but you can limit it to just KVM, and shut down everything else. So that way they can't stick in a USB stick and try to connect to their VM. So from that perspective at home, we didn't really have to worry about that. Obviously in the cloud, we did allow them to use things like Aspera, and we have our own internal, websites for Sony that we were allow them to get to. We could air gap whatever we needed to through the networking in the cloud if necessary. So we didn't have any real concerns about the security in that respect.
Gotcha.
And one of the fortunate things about being, part of a larger company is we have an great InfoSec team that is dedicated to this, and submitting to them what our intentions are, what our workflow is. But at a certain point, you're paying these editors to do their job, and we have our image on it where it's like enforced password length and all that annoying stuff, and then have your monitors go to sleep after a certain period of time. But if inevitably they're going to have to view the material in their homes to work on said materials. So it's going to be different. Like if you're working on a superhero movie versus a multicam movie, they're going to have two very different requirements. So you just cater to what's needed.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, if you guys are okay going a little bit longer before we ask our last question, I would like to toss back to Roger and find out, Roger, with the infrastructure that you are building, how do Avid editors and Resolve ColorS, and how does security work within your infrastructure?
Yeah, so it's a combination. It's a combination of a couple of things. So from our platform deployed right out the gate, it is a hardened software deployment out of the gate. So there isn't much post process to happen there. But from a content perspective, most of the content that resides, whether it's on Nexus or what other storage, that security really rises around ACLs and networking, and micro segmentation from VM to VM interaction. So that's built into the platform from a microseg perspective. But yeah, most of the firewall ACL rules is how customers are approaching that outside of the HCI software from a compliance perspective.
Awesome. Thank you. So Larry Chernoff, you're the lucky one that gets this next question. It's from Mike Miller. And he's looking at Parsec and he says, it looks like a jump desktop, no machine splash competitor. Is this correct? And how does it support, and maybe this is for Guthrie, but how does it support 3 monitors? For him, he's from Paramount and his clients, they want traditional Avid bin monitor, editor monitor, and full screen playback monitor configuration. So that's at least 3 monitors. So how does this work with Parsec?
Well, okay, that's a good question, and it's probably the only shortcoming of Parsec at the moment is it doesn't support 3 monitors. So I'll tell you how we worked around it, although Parsec will be coming out with a 3-monitor version shortly, which is, that's part of the learning experience for companies that are trying to get into the media space. But the way we worked around it is we just simply used what we call ultra wides. The ultra wide is a high resolution, and we were able to give them that plus a full screen playback. I would say that, probably 65 to 70% of the editors were perfectly happy with that. Some of them didn't care. They just wanted 2 monitors, regular old, 27-inch monitors. But we recognize that a 3rd monitor is absolutely essential, and we've been leading on them for quite a while. There's a couple of developments that we have going with Parsec. I think, you're right. There's several competitors out there, and maybe 1 or 2 of them are already doing multi-monitors. The thing that we wanted more than anything was to have a company that we could cooperate with. And the CEO of Parsec is extraordinarily talented. He's a very young man, and he lives in New York, by the way, Roger, if you want to meet him. He's a nice fella, and he's accessible. That's really the key, is he's accessible. So if you make a phone call and you need to talk to him about something, he's right there for you. And even though he has literally thousands of users in the gaming world, he doesn't have that many in the media and entertainment world. So he's very interested in making sure that Parsec satisfies those requirements. It's coming soon to a theater near you.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. We're pretty much out of questions from the attendees. So I would like for all of us, if we could, to leave tonight with a final thought. And it's, we've talked a lot about some really dynamic workflows and how we got there. What do you think is the silver lining? How are we going to utilize these workflows going forward? And what's the gift of the pandemic?
I'd like to comment on that. I think, and that's a good way to put it, Belinda, that something good came out of it after all, not just closed restaurants and all that. I think what we've seen is a reduction in traffic in LA. It's certainly heavier today than it was 6 months ago, but it's a hell of a lot lighter than it was a year and a half ago. So a reduction in the number of rooms you need at a production office because people are working from home. And maybe the most important thing is the quality of life improvement for these poor young assistant editors who get up early, drive an hour, work 12 hours, drive an hour back, and are exhausted all the time. They really are appreciative of the fact that, and the editors as well, by the way, that they can wake up at any time they like, and if they have a creative, moment, an epiphany, they can go ahead and sit down at their home while the baby's sleeping and make sure that they get their idea out the next morning. I mean, it's really a fantastic thing. That's a gift to the people who are in the industry who work hard and at the same time want to have a home life. And I think that's one of the benefits for me anyway, or for the people I've associated with.
I
Awesome.
fully agree with you, Larry. That's especially with assistant editors, because a lot of times they're stuck doing outputs or things that don't require necessarily to be right at the machine. So to be able to have a better home life balance is probably much appreciated in the post world. But for me, I've said this before, but the only thing I'm 100% confident on is that I'm not confident on anything, because my opinion has changed from day one to 9 months ago to 6 months ago to 3 months ago. So it's just continually evolving. I think it's great that at the highest levels, people know what resources are available to them. But at the same time, I also feel like we're one leaked movie away from going back to the quote unquote traditional route. So we'll see. It's exciting and it's different, and hopefully it could be more efficient. But yeah, I look forward to seeing what changes ahead.
Yeah, I will tell you that I read a statistic that said that it's not that people don't want to go back to work, it's the commute that they don't want to do anymore. And now they don't have to. So Roger, what about you? What have we learned from the Nutanix side of things and that workflow that has been a gift to the industry?
Yeah, so I think the guys touch on some really good points from a quality of life and work perspective. I think one of the things as an engineer, and not as a vendor, but more of an engineer, I think engineers always come up with these innovative ways to move the business forward and do things. And whether the higher levels at the top or the executives don't always want to pull the trigger or take that risk. I think this pandemic, the industry was kind of standing still from a technology perspective a little bit, just more, bells and whistles of the same thing. I think this forced the industry to go and take the next leap forward. And it's like Adam said, it's exciting. But I think without the pandemic, we wouldn't have, as an industry, wouldn't have been forced to go and do these, these really tip of the sword kinds of things that we're doing now, and really go and investigate all of the things that are possible. Just making we were just kind of stuck in this legacy world of making things faster versus looking at everything holistically and how we can make it more efficient, how can we make it better, not just faster. So that's kind of what I.
Fantastic. So Steve, as the other engineer on the panel tonight, what do you think?
I think Roger's definitely right. I think the exploration, the willingness to explore, really is one of the highlights for me that's come out of the pandemic. The idea that we don't have to use a tool as we originally intended it. We saw some amazing solutions, all along the pandemic, everything from remote ADR to, just people thinking about the cloud in a different way. I mean, we have so many internal initiatives now to say, well, what else can we do with this platform that we never considered using for this thing before? And opening up people's eyes to the idea that the cloud is not just some, very technical thing that you can't really get your hands on. And oh, by the way, it's really expensive too. We've proven that that's not necessarily the case if you know how to manage it and how to use it correctly. And I think that's been really important.
I think that's great. And I think this is a great place to wrap it up. Roger, Steve, Adam, Larry, thank you so much. And to my co-producer, Linda, I'm going to pass the ball back to you, but thank you everybody for sticking with us throughout the hour plus.
What a wonderful presentation. You guys have been just phenomenal. And Belinda, you rocked as the host and moderator. I can't thank you enough. I'm so happy that you were elected again as manager. It's wonderful to have you. I also want to thank our tech hosts, Chris Alvarez and Ray. I'm going to mispronounce your name, so I'm going to say Gugas, but he came last minute to help us sort of tag team here on the hosting. I think this might be one of the last Zoom Smpte Hollywood meetings. because I think we can open up now, and we're going to try that. So I just want to thank everybody. I saw all that are on, and I am thrilled. I think that the audience is just as important as the people participating. So thank you all. And I also just want to give a shout out to Sony because of getting Adam and Stephen. I first talked to Emmanuel Board at Sony, who then referred me to Daniel De La Rosa and Bill Bagalar, who referred us to Adam and Stephen. And so that's fabulous. Belinda came up with Roger, who's been wonderful. And Larry Chernoff, what can I say? You're fantastic. And what everyone is doing to keep this industry going and thriving is appreciative. So with that, I thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful evening, and take care.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a
Good
good
night,
one.
everybody. Thank you again.